No, you do not have to compromise your artistic vision when making your podcast audio accessible. I've got some tips from professional engineers to show you just how to do it. Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. Today we'll wrap up this mini-series on making accessible audio for those of us with hearing loss, and I think you're going to like it. I've been teasing all week about things to do, but today, finally, I'm going to give you the steps. The steps to make the next time you're sitting down behind your audio editing platform exactly what you should do and in what order. And I'm not kidding. I'm going to do that. One little tiny caveat, well, two tiny caveats. One, this doesn't come out of my head. I enlisted the help of 4 really smart audio engineers that I know, Mr. Marcus DePaula, Mr. Tom Kelly, Josh Wade, and Chris Curran. I'll put links to all these guys in the episode details, so click on through. So this is not just me. I actually had this vetted by people who edit audio, engineer audio professionally. These guys help me make the right kind of steps. That's caveat number 1. Caveat number 2 is every DAW is different. So the plugins I use may not be the plugins you use. The things your tools are called might be different than the tools that I'm going to talk about are called. So I'm going to talk about these in concepts, but 5 very distinct steps, and then let you do a little exploring on your own. So here's how to do it. Here's how to make accessible audio out of your podcast episode files. Ready for this? All right. Step number 1. And by the way, I'm talking about vocal tracks here with this. Step number 1, clean up the noise. That's the first thing you've got to do. When you bring in these audio tracks that are typically vocals, you need to clean them up first. That probably means noise removal. Hopefully you've got a good noise removal tool, as I do with Hindenburg Journalist Pro. It might mean some other sort of filterings. I have a wonderful filter from iZotope that is called the Voice Denoise plugin, which is great. It does a fantastic job of scrubbing out a lot of the junk that's in there. So step 1 is clean up the noise of the track, because there's no reason to process noises. Get rid of as much noise as you possibly can, number 1. Number 2, very important that you control the dynamic range. Second step, control the dynamic range. Dynamic range means really, really, really loud parts and then really, really, really soft parts. Now, of course, that's not going to come through because I'm controlling the dynamics, but you understand. It's the difference between loud parts and quiet parts. And you want to try and get some control over that. Now, you can control that a couple different ways. One is you can actually go in with your little volume tool, your little normalizer tool, you can do whatever, and go in word by word and lift and or lower those so that you remove as much of those ranges as possible. By the way, quietness can be communicated in different ways other than actually real quiet audio. It can. So control your dynamics. I use a plugin that's called the Vocal Writer from Waves. It's amazing. It's just as if I was in the studio talking and somebody was in the control room writing a fader up and down, making sure that my voice or my actors' voices or whomever's voices on there are nice and even all the time. Control the dynamics. Step 3, once you've got a clean track and a track that doesn't have a huge swinging dynamic range, you can now equalize, add a little EQ. This is basically sweeten the sound. If someone's really bassy, you can adjust that. If there's way too much sibilance, you can adjust that. If you just need to go into your EQ bands and tweak things, now's a great time. You got a clean channel with a relatively even dynamic range. Now's the time to add EQ. Great. Step number 4. After you've got a clean channel with dynamics in a relatively easy range that is nice and EQ'd so the voices sound good, then you compress. Here's the trick about compression that you need to understand. It's not really a trick. It's what compression does. And I thought about this morning as I was in making coffee with my Aeropress, where I literally press down on the coffee, as you might with a French press, press down. That's adding compression. You know what compression never does? Compression never releases. There's a myth out there that compression will actually make quiet parts louder. It won't. Compression just basically squeezes down the track. You might think it's the same as in controlling dynamics. It's not. Very different process. But compression is good. Can you overcompress? Probably. But I wouldn't worry about that. Right now, there's way too many under-compressed audio tracks out there. Add a little compression, depending on what your plugins might be. You've even got a tube compressor. If you want to add some warmth and niceness to it, great. But just add your compression as your fourth step. And then 5, the last step. Once you've done that, once you have a clean track, no noise or noise eliminated, once you've controlled the dynamics, once you've EQ'd each track so that it sounds nice and lovely with a good tone, and you've compressed that track, then finally, you're going to do that with all your vocal tracks, whether it's just you and your guest, a voiceover track plus you plus your guest, whatever. Do those 4 steps to every single one of your tracks. Add in your music, add in your effects as separate tracks. You can do any adjustment if you need to those. Then finally, step 5, mix and master it all down so that it all sounds good together. Make sure you're listening along as it's playing. Make any adjustments, especially if you're using plugins to do one-click wonders on things, which I'm a big fan of. Make sure it works. Make sure it sounds good. And then finally, step 5, after you've mastered and mixed it all together, export it at -16 LUFS. And if the tool that you are using does not export at -16 LUFS, get another tool. There are some options. You can go to Auphonic and a few others that will let you export it at -16, but seriously, get another tool. That's it. Clean the noise, control the dynamics, EQ, compress, master, and export. Done deal. Now you have audio that is accessible so that people like me and a lot of other people out there who have hearing loss, some mild, some moderate, some severe. If it's correctable, we can probably still hear all of the content, all those dialogue bits, all the little asides that are so key to the story you're trying to tell. We can not only hear them in a quiet environment, but we'll be able to hear them when we're in the car, when we're on the bus, or any other noisy environment that you take for granted. We'll be able to listen to it. And best of all, not one of these steps up there compromises your artistic ability. Not a one. You will still convey the same message the same way. You're just assembling this audio in a way that everybody, even those of us with hearing loss, can enjoy the content. Easy. Well, straightforward. It's a process, but it's one you need to learn. I guess if there's a step 6, it should be listened once it's actually kicked back down in an MP3 file. But yeah. Once again, special thanks to Marcus DePaula, Tom Kelly, Josh Wade, and Chris Curran for giving me their thoughts on how this whole thing works. I appreciate you guys. Again, links in the episode details. And 2 things before I go. 1, buy me a coffee /EvoTerra. If you enjoyed these tips, this mini-series, more mini-series are coming, and you can show your appreciation to me at buymeacoffee.com/EvoTerra. Second thing is that Flick group ad is working. People are talking to me. We're talking about next week's episodes. We're talking about this week's miniseries. Check out the episode details for a link to the new Flick group app that I am part of. And that's it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, because I don't do an episode on Fridays, and I shall be back on Monday with a brand new miniseries on podcast pontifications. Cheers.